Hello and welcome to the channel. I hope you are all well and enjoying your fishing. In Spain we have a nymph and it's called La Resabiada, and it looks something like this. Now today I'm going to tie it as a stonefly. I'm sure it will be equally as successful in that particular model. There are quite a few materials, so I'll give them to you as we go along. In the vise I have a size 12 hook, a nymph hook, and a 3.3 copper bead. Now if you want to use 3.8, that's fine. You just adjust the weight according to the depth and flow. So I'm just going to put a bed of thread onto the hook shank and trim up the excess. I'm going to tie on some lead wire to give it a little bit of extra weight. I should do that and break that off as well. Tie that down, and I'm going to put a little bit of glue on there just to keep it in place. And bind it down with a thread. Yeah. And wind back down the shank to more or less level with where the barb might be. Now, as is normal for stonefly nymphs, I'm going to use goose bite for the tail, and this is fiery brown. I'm just going to cut off a couple of bites. Right, whether you tie them in as a pair or whether you tie them in individually, that's entirely up to you. I'm going to tie them in individually, and of course as long as the bite is pointing outwards, it doesn't matter whether it's one or two, but I find with one, if I need to adjust the length, which I'm going to do here, like so, one bite is easier to adjust. Right, I'm going to put in the other bite on this side. There we are, that looks pretty even to me. And bind those down, trim them up, and tidy up. We're going to use a copper rib, and this is 0.18, and it's quite a reasonable thickness. This is not a delicate nymph by any stretch of the imagination, so I'm just going to tie that in to length and bind that down. Like so. Now the body of the nymph is standard pheasant tail, so I'm going to take off, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 fibres. I'm going to trim up the points at the weakest point there and tie them in. Just pull them to length. Like so. Tidy up back to the thorax area. I'm just going to wind these on. Now whether you use fingers like me or whether you use some hackle pliers, that's up to you also. Just wind them up to the thorax area. I'm going to tie them off. And trim up the excess. And I'm going to wind this copper wire in the opposite direction. It will give it support and protection. Like so. Looks like there's a couple of fibres of the pheasant tail just come loose there. I'll deal with that in just a moment. Get rid of this. I'll be just fine. Now I'm going to put a thorax cover on, and in this instance, I'm going to be using some magic shrimp foil. This is dark brown, and it's from Fisherman in Czechoslovakia. And it has similar properties to the 233 in the sense that that's dark brown also. And if you wanted to use some scudback or something of that nature, that would be just fine. So I'm just tying that in the thorax cover, like so. And for the thorax, we're going to use some peacock dubbing. This is quite a heavy thorax, so you'll need quite a decent noodle of dubbing. Let's see how we get on with that. Right, now before I bring the thorax cover over, I'm going to use a partridge feather for some legs. Now, if you've got a packet of feathers, that's fine. I've got a whole skin, and the variation of colours on the feathers is enormous. Possibly a variation that you won't get in a packet. Now this is probably 25, 30 euros, dollars, pounds, whatever. But it's a long-term investment. I mean, this could last you a lifetime, depending upon how often you use partridge. So I'm just going to take off a feather like so, get rid of all the fluff at the bottom. And I'm going to pull back the fibres. Let me just try and even this up a little bit more. Now, whatever you do with a partridge feather, you're never going to get the same amount of fibres on each side. That's just the way the feather is. They're always uneven as such. So we have to do our best and see what we can get out of this. So I'm just going to snip the point out, like so. Pull the fibres forward and place them on top and tie them down. Now the length of these fibres is entirely up to you, as long as it's not longer than the length of the body of the fly, you'll be fine. So let me just trim that up, preferably without cutting the rest of the fibres. Right. And pull the thorax cover over and pull down partridge. And tie off the cover and snip it off. Right, there's just a few fibres there. I don't know whether I can move those just a bit. There we go. I don't think the fish will mind, to be fair. And before I tie it off, I'm going to put a little bit of glue onto the thread. And tie it off behind the bead. And trim up the thread. Right, I'm also just going to pick out a little bit of this thorax fibre underneath. Smarten it up a little bit. And there you have the finished fly. I hope you enjoyed that. If you're not already a subscriber, consider being so and turn on your community notifications. Give it a thumbs up. And I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for viewing. Bye.